The goal of this podcast is to help you break in and thrive in advertising. We do that every week, and sometimes with 2 episodes a week, by sharing the stories and advice of those rocking it on the other side. I mention it in this episode, but today's guest is someone who I've admired from afar for the entirety of my academic and professional career. He is a man that creates iconic advertising characters like Flo and Dr. Rick for Progressive. Sean McBride is the Chief Creative Officer at Arnold Worldwide, headquartered in Boston. A full circle moment for myself, as now he comes on the podcast, but I also have the pleasure of working for Sean, as Arnold is a part of the Havas network. I help Arnold announce new work and new hires to the world, and they often have a lot to say because they consistently are inventing amazing campaigns. So in this episode, I asked the questions that young Gino once only dreamed of asking when he was an aspiring advertiser, and questions about concepts I still struggle to grasp, like how Sean creates long-standing campaigns in a world of such fast-paced reactive advertising. He dives deep on his perspective on how advertising and culture come to play together, whether or not we as advertisers need to tap and leverage cultural moments, or if we should try and create them. As well, I love his advice for early entry-level talent in advertising, those who just broke in, let's say. He explains a beautiful concept, simple concept, I'm calling now the 18-month starter plan. No, let's call it the 18-month starter blueprint for how we should act in a new agency setting, and I believe it to be true and amazing advice. So we're calling it the 18-month starter blueprint. Boom, that's pretty good. And you can connect with Sean and see his recommended resources. You can find those resources by heading to our Instagram at Breaking and Entering Pod. Hey, and I'm also starting something new. I will gladly help connect and introduce you personally to our guests. So Sean, in this case, if you leave a review on Apple Podcasts, do that, connect with me after, and I'll be happy to make that intro. Now on with the show. This is the Breaking and Entering Advertising Podcast, and as usual, I'm your accomplice, Gino Schellenberger. Kick it, Mikey. Sean McBride, welcome to the Breaking and Entering Advertising Podcast. How the heck are you doing today, sir?
Gino, I'm good, buddy. Thank you for having me.
And you are in the office. Tell us where you're at today.
Yeah, I'm in downtown Crossing in Boston. Arnold's headquarters are like in the building where my mom bought her wedding dress. So I know, crazy. So I'm like at Arnold getting ready for a big pitch. Joyfully back in the office with my cohorts.
So, I love it. Beautiful office, beautiful space too. And I'm curious, what did your parents do for a living?
Oh boy. My dad worked for what is now Deloitte for about 30 something years.
Accounting?
Yeah. He ran I think that's where he started, but he ran the gamut, management consulting some, and then he went and got his accounting degree, and then super company man. Literally
Nice.
unironically called the place the firm.
Nice.
Yeah, pretty good.
Love
and
that.
then my mom was an art teacher when we were young, and then stayed home for a while, and then eventually she bought a gym, and she was an aerobics instructor who then bought and ran the ladies' gym, which was not a great
Legal.
gym when you're when she's on the town cable channel giving aerobics classes, and your buddies see that. That's not ideal.
Oh, so she was getting some broadcast time. That's interesting.
Like the town cable channel, but nevertheless available to the 15-year-old boys in my universe. So that was not ideal.
I think I like starting off this podcast, and quite a few of these, with what your parents did. I think that gives some good insight. To me, you got management and you got an art teacher. That kind of breeds like a creative in advertising in a way.
It extends so my grandfather, my mom's side, and I never met the dude, but he was like an opera singer who basically ditched my mom and my grandmother during the war. And then on my dad's side, he was like a butter salesman. So it actually extends like the one side and the other is like an artist and a
Ah,
guy all the way through.
gotcha. Which kind of led to you, and you are the chief creative officer at Arnold Worldwide. So, want to learn what are we going to talk about today, Sean? I think the goal of this podcast is to give advice. You are obviously at the top role in advertising. Most people want to be a chief creative officer. I don't know. Do you still want to be a chief creative officer?
Yeah, I do most days.
Great. Most days. And you've been at Arnold for almost 16 years now. So you got plenty of advice, plenty of knowledge stored up. So we'll get to that advice. I want to know how you broke into advertising. And also, I want to talk about culture,
Yeah,
enabling it versus creating it, and what your take on creating ads in culture, how that system works. Because I'm new
yeah,
and our audience wants to learn too, because we hear this all the time. So those are kind of the
right.
big points that I want to dive into. But first, let's start with Arnold
Let's
and
start.
what makes Arnold so special. Award winning. I've seen it in the trades quite a bit. I remember working at Portfolio School and trying to reach out to Super Bowl creators, and you guys have always been in the trades that I followed. So, what makes you guys different, notable, unique? Let's hear about Arnold and
It's
your perspective.
one of the hardest things, right, as it relates to the industry to like to quantify. So tough
Yeah.
question, Gates, but I love it. Arnold is literally the agency that inspired me to get into advertising. I'm Boston born and bred, and was a young person in the late '90s and early aughts. And at that time, Arnold was making killer, famous work for Volkswagen and Truth, and it's always felt to be like a specific kind of work that had like real intelligence to it, like obviously like incredible execution, but real intelligence to and real insight to. And Boston has like a academic bent, right? And I don't think we're an academic agency, but I think the idea that maybe we're 5% smarter feels true. Yeah, it is. It's right, exactly. It's always been a place that I believed in fundamentally the spirit of and fit my style. And it's probably why I stayed for so long. And then at some point, like the crazy shit happened that I became the CCO of the place. And, the first thing I had to do was like, or at least I felt like I had to do, was like give words to why I stayed so long and what made it special and what I believe was different. So like I kind of locked myself in a room for a couple weeks and then came out, and the words that we use now are that we make it safe for our clients to be brave. And I like those words because they capture three or four things that I think make us different. It begins with the ability to execute the best the work in the country. And I think we can do that. But then maybe working with us, there's a long-termism to Arnold that's maybe born of being in a secondary city so people don't jump around, or maybe it's just about like grounded people who were more comfortable with the idea of their clients being famous than themselves.
Yep.
And then there's a little bent of like strategy to that I think, if you look back at the things that are like definitive Arnold work, like the insight behind the truth work, the insight behind the Dr. Rick work now, it's just like knock you on your ass level strategy that comes together in great execution. Um, for me, though, all those factors like come together and they make it so that if you're a client who believes in the power of creativity, but like needs the optimal support and circumstances, Arnold's really good at that, right? Because it's just people who aren't trying to mine your brand to do something to make themselves famous and then bolt, and believe fundamentally that we can strategically not just ground you in a great idea, but then measure it afterwards and believe it's going to work. Like we believe in the best creativity in the world actually driving business. So if you're a client and you're like, I want to make great work, but I need to be in an environment where that feels like I can do that and not be putting my career in the line or buying into some shit that's frivolous. I think Arnold's really good at that.
Absolutely. And I also have to say, having worked with you guys and knowing you all, I think the dynamic of leadership, just I guess the collaboration, and you guys know each other so well. Val, George, and yourself, and now Andrew Arnott just joined as well.
Yeah,
So, can you speak a little bit about the dynamic and how this team works and what makes you guys so great working together?
uh, I would love to. I mean, I love like genuinely from the bottom of my heart, love that crew. And I don't say that like because we're all new and it's been 9 months. Val and I have been working together for 16 years. She's still like, on the short list of people that I'd like to go have a beer with just
Oh yeah.
cause. I think if you put like me, George, Bree, and Val at a restaurant at 6 p.m., like, and we didn't have any work to do tomorrow, we're just going out for dinner, like, we'd be there at midnight. You know what I mean? Like laughing our asses off. George, especially, like so goddamn loud and everything. My God.
Love it. And
So,
you can tell, like being on the outskirts, and it's very visible that you guys enjoy each other's company, and that probably makes for some good creative work that's strategically sound as well.
and it helps when you're in the trenches too, right? This business gets tough, as you know. So you're
Mhm.
able to remember, imagine positive intent, remember that you like the person
I
and
guess
like figure out the solution.
for the aspiring advertiser out there, find your dream team, like your crew in college or at portfolio school or in your neighborhood or community. Like you can develop and find the right people that you enjoy. It's hard to do, but you got to put yourself out there. And maybe
Right.
like that starts with like, putting out like some good work on socials or yeah, with social media. I think there's some really interesting ways that you can do it. And I'm happy to help the listeners like craft that or introduce people. But I think finding that dream team early on could be the big differentiation point. That's what we try to do with like our award show with 3 people and group these like-minded individuals together. And that's so crucial when you first are entering out too, not just when
Yeah.
you make it into the industry.
I believe in that for sure. And it's like, it's very rare to spend 16 years in one place and actually get the big job because a lot of this business, not by employees fault, is built so that like you kind of struggle to move up and you got to go position yourself to somebody else and bounce around and
Oh
diversify.
yeah.
But a big reason why I did it this way was because of that very thing. It was like, and not just that group of four, but a lot of people that are around me in production and other creatives that have worked with me for a long time. I look around and I'd be like, I just don't buy I'm going to find a better team than this. Like the opportunities never dried up either, which is a positive, but I don't know that everybody can control that completely, but I do think the power of like a team that you believe in and that you can rely on it's one of the rarest things in the business. And it's one of the most powerful things in the business.
So you got this team, George, yourself, Ree, Val, and I'm sure some other. Am I missing any like ELT, like
No, those are
senior
the,
folk?
the
Those are the
four.
four.
Yeah. Are the core that runs the agency.
So
I mean,
that
I'll
four core,
yep.
and you get together and you get a brief or you're on a pitch. I guess how would you describe this team's approach to creating a new campaign? What are those steps? What's from concept to execution, high level? Can you give us like some interesting insight into how this team works and looks at problems?
The best version of a team in this industry is a team where ideas move in two directions, right? When we describe to someone how this process works, it's like, well, the client starts with X and then goes through account team and then strategy does Y and then it goes to creatives and we work for a while and then we come back. That feels linear. And you need structure like that to get work done. But I would say something like Dr. Rick, which to me is an idea that perfectly demonstrates that strategy when done really well and creative execution when done really well are tied. You can't separate the two. You need to be two ways in order to get to that place. I think what we were talking about before about relationships, that helps a lot. Nobody is more essential to us being good creatives than Valerie and Bree. And they have different jobs in being creative. One of them, Valerie, is like understands what it takes to get great creative done and does everything selflessly to make that happen. And the other is like um, the smartest person in the industry potentially. Like I don't know how much time you spent with Brie, but like Jesus, like remarkable mental
I need to
capacity,
spend more time with her. I definitely need to
remarkably
spend more time.
insightful. But she's also like, what do we need to do to make the output awesome?
The team sounds incredible. Thank you for sharing. Now I want to get back to you and your process. What's like an exercise that you do if you get a creative block or you're in a stump? Now
Uh,
you probably have a system and you've gotten some reps
yeah,
in, right? So when you were like just starting out for the creatives out there, like what were some of those things that you
that's
would do?
that's a good question. Like, to me, it's not exactly answering your question, but, like, this job is a lot more fun when you any job, anything in life is a lot more fun when you know how to do it, right? Like,
Of
that's just
course.
how it was. Like, I don't know, I'm a guitar player, and I remember picking up early guitar playing blows, like, your fingers hurt, and it doesn't sound like anything, and you're like, "This
Mhm.
sucks." And then you get to a place someday where it's, like, really joyful because you know how to do it.
Right.
So, to me, like
Even understanding that, Sean, like, you will get better over time and you will like, people don't realize that. I
yeah,
guess, like, they think that it's the end of the world. I'm not cut out for this business right away. I can't get this on the first try or even the first 15 tries.
totally.
That awareness alone is a great reminder of the fundamentals that you will need to put work into this. It might not happen in a year. I recently interviewed somebody that said it took them 10 years to even get shortlisted
Yeah.
at Cannes, and then that person got it, and then from there, that was the spark they needed, but it took 10 years. It takes, like,
Yeah.
years to get that first big idea sold.
Hey, I did not have an exciting career, until my 30s, so I'm a demonstration to that too, and I guess the thing that I would say is, like, I have people on my team now who I've been connected to on some level for the better part of 20 years creatively. So I literally remember when you were like, "Boy, that person's smart and talented, but they can't do it yet," and now I literally think they're one of the best people in the world at it, and so, like, that there is a natural evolution, and my
Mhm,
thing that I try to help young people frame the early part of their career as, like, because I think there's social things right now where I think a young person doesn't know if they're getting taken advantage of if they get worked to the bone for not that much money and they're young. I don't blame them for feeling that. Like, that is a question we all have to decide for ourselves, like, whether the juice is worth the squeeze about how much time you spend and
mm,
your life you give up. But to me, a good thing to remind them is this shit is much more fun when you know
mhm,
how to do it. And I've watched people not know how to do it and then become the best. So, like, that is what's required to get to the place where you know how to do it.
and then
Like,
if you dip out, where are you going? Like, what's the other option? Like,
well,
I don't prefer another option personally.
I think there's sometimes, like, it's hard to do the trustful that is like this nights and weekends thing for not a lot of pay is worth it. I can understand that, to be like, am I being taken advantage of? Is this stupid? Will this benefit me? So I just think, like, I try to remind people, like, anything. Like, it feels so much better to be like, "Here's your assignment," to be like, "I know how to do this." Like,
Mhm.
I'm comfortable doing this. I'm not worried about having a bunch of ideas in a week because because 'cause I'm good at this. I know
Yeah,
what's good and bad. I've practiced. And, I can feel young people not sure if the juice is worth the squeeze sometimes at that. And again, if you don't wanna do this, like, that's totally cool. But I
yeah,
think to trust that getting better at it and putting in, like, the repetitions that everybody's had to, including
mhm.
me, um, it does pay off. You do get to a part at the end where it becomes a lot more fun because 'cause you're not anxious about, like, "Can I do this?"
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think, like, more fun, I guess, is super crucial. And to me, there's not, you know, probably, and you tell me if you agree or not, probably there's nothing better than seeing a long lasting campaign that an idea that so sounds strategically with great execution that has legs. It can uh, be streamed across different mediums and channels for a long time. That with the Super Bowl having a 5-10 year campaign run is
Yeah.
super impressive to me. I feel like those are the pinnacles when you have a recognizable campaign that's pretty much ingrained in culture. And to me, Dr. Rick is one of those. And I think a lot of people can agree with that. They recognize it, they love it, or they don't, but they recognize it and they respect it. They should. My father laughs at it. And I laugh at it all the time. But I guess with Dr. Rick, or any campaigns that you've done, how do you ensure that they stay relevant and aligned with current cultural trends and stay top of mind to audiences' brains?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's, like, one of the biggest things, in the industry now is, like, a push and pull about that subject, like, whether because so many things have changed, it's like whether it's still viable to create culture, which I think ads do sometimes, or whether it's smarter to draft off things that exist, right, and respond to culture, which I think advertising's done for a long time also.
Oh,
And
yeah,
and
yeah.
And
It's
when
like
the
proactive versus reactive, would you say?
Yeah, right. Or like, or, whatever, like creating your own world versus using things in culture that exists and drafting. And obviously there's like gray in between those things.
Hmm.
But I think you see it in larger culture at large too. Like I think, response to something you think the world might like versus like bold, unabashed creation of something no one's ever seen before that you can't tell if they're going to like it or not. I think streamers struggle with that, right? Like if we had focus group Game of Thrones and I'd be like, Gino, do you like like big sprawling things about wizards and incest? I think, I don't know if you like that show, but you may have been like, hell no. And then
Hmm.
you find yourself watching it and being like, Jesus, this is my favorite show of the last 5 years. It's about like, surprise, right? And the feeling that something is created just for you. Like to me, those are the core things of great creative, right? Really, those two things, like surprise, like holy shit, and then the feeling of something having been made with care by somebody for you. So I'm a believer in creating things like and you can't be if you're sitting in this, you can't not be if you're sitting in the seat that I'm in, which is like, we came up with this character and now like, my Halloween's a unique experience for me because like literally, like ad characters that I've created come to my house on Halloween. So,
Oh,
so
like
I'm a,
like which ones?
oh, we get a lot of flows. You get a lot of flows. Like a ton. And so you go like, all right, cool. Well, then in a vacuum, like creating something new from zero is possible. Now, media dollars, when that started, fragmentation of media landscape, like all those things make this a more complicated conversation. But I think like belief in big creativity has to begin with belief that if you make something awesome, it will augment the amount of people who see it and make your client's money go further. Like, and I do believe that. But as you span media spends and the landscape, it gets more complex, right? Somewhere between something in culture happen and you have an awesome social response in 3 minutes, which also works in its own way, and spending a lot of time having a big master plan about how you're going to spend $1 billion on a new character you created. Like somewhere between those two things lives the right balance of drafting off of culture and creating culture.
Yeah.
Um, I think the push the industry needs is about creating. We have a reactive culture, right? Like there's more belief in optimization than there's ever been. There's more belief in like, I can take a creative thing, I can hear some input, I can mess with that and improve it and give it to the world. And I think that lives in denial of some basic truths about creative. One being surprise. I think here's the formula for a good ad is never the formula for a good ad because part of what needs to happen is I go, holy shit, I never thought of that before. And like to extrapolate that into Dr. Rick, like Dr. Rick's an easy joke to get, right? Parental behaviors. I think the thing that the team has done really well is there are so many low hanging examples of that that have been used in culture 10 times that aren't funny. Like that campaign manages to be like, holy crap, is that true? And also, I never thought of it before. To me, the moment when, a writer here was like, all right, and then like the guy does that thing where he just introduces himself with a firm handshake and says his full name in a club. Like, I can't remember. The guy's name was Tom. He goes, Tom Pritchard. It's like, yes, exactly. But also, I've never heard that joke before, right? It's
Hmm.
really easy. And we've had a few moments, don't get me wrong, where you go like, dark sandals and dark socks. But like that joke I've heard 200 times. So how are you true? How are you universal and true, but not tired, familiar? And this optimization mentality or the this worked, let's repeat it mentality can work in the face of that. I get why it feels comfortable, but if we look at other parts of the creative universe, like when Nickelback or Coldplay makes the same song, it turns people off, right? Like at a certain point, you're like, I've heard that shit. Or when Game of Thrones goes off the air and they have 7 other sword wielding epics,
Hmm.
none of them hit, right? Like that first one. Because they don't have that thing where you go, this is brand new, this is unique, this is a special thing that someone made just for me. And creative people like obsess over Wes Anderson, but um, that's an example to me that makes this phenomenon clear. Wes Anderson can make you feel surprised with props, and you feel surprised by it, and also, man, like there's some creative mind behind that made that special just for me.
So then, looking at our listeners and the target audience, which is aspiring advertisers, maybe people that have just joined the industry, you are saying to push towards the more creation aspect, this avenue. How else can we boil down this as advice for the aspiring advertiser? What should they be doing to really adopt your philosophy?
That's a great question. I think we are currently a beacon of new thing creation. And I think we've proven that in the right environment, not in every environment, but in the right environment, that can work and become as cultural as things that live in entertainment and beyond. And I also think that's an encouragement for people to bring their unique point of view to their work, right? Like everybody's doing X because that's trendy. And I saw three things win an award that look like this. So I'm going to make the fourth.
Mhm.
I don't know that that's a great long-term strategy. Could be liberating for young people to be like, just, bring the unique idea that's in your brain.
I love that. I think then we see these redundancies with student portfolios. If they go to a portfolio school, they're all working on the same briefs, or
Yeah.
they're taking the same benchmarks from what's popular. There could be a sea of sameness, and then I always try when I go to speak to schools to encourage people to bring your perspective and go big while you're
Yeah.
still a student or an aspiring advertiser, because some of that work will have to last you 2, 3 years. You might not get the best briefs starting out, or it might take you some time to figure it out. So while you have no clients and no internal review systems, might as well push for those big creation centered ideas. I think that's a really good point for those listening.
And, to me, like everybody's different about books, but especially for, writer centric books,
Mm.
I don't, seeing how in ad school you built like a complete ad idea, like from conception to execution is great. But like, if you're in a place where you're not sure what to include, like things that show you can write your ass off in any environment to me
Oh,
are great. Like,
like
I
what?
mean, I don't know, like someone who has funny Twitter, it's like,
Funny Twitter. That's a good one.
God,
Maybe
like
like a
Twitter is like the easiest because it's basically like modern headlines. But anything like someone who's like, I wrote for this humor magazine, somebody who's like, I wrote this like cartoon, like whatever that is. I guess my point is just, I think we're not so writing focused, and every agency is different. Everybody's needs are different. For me, for a long time, I've needed like funny dialogue writers, and ad schools have not been wonderfully set up to deliver that for me. And maybe it's because there aren't enough places that have needed that, but we have. When I see someone in any form who could land a joke or understand the sort of cadence of a setup and a takedown, I'm like, bring them in.
I
Like,
I want to take this moment to talk about a meeting that we were just in together. You probably don't remember it. It was like a creative review for North America. I won't get into the details, but I saw firsthand. I don't know how I was in this meeting or why, but it was, hey, I was there, and I'm glad I was, because I saw you in action, and you did this, and I wanted to compliment you and showcase to the people listening some credibility. There was another CCO within the network sharing a new 30-second spot, I believe, and your advice, just in the moment when people were laughing, you had one like constructive feedback item was like, don't jump into the joke so quickly, and you understood the flow and the structure of like that comedy ad. And that one little note was so perfect. And I believe that CCO is going to take that and implement that feedback, or they should. I just think it's so great. I just wanted to call that out and compliment you that you
thanks.
understood right there. And I guess I want to know now, data. I don't like the word data analytics. What's your take on data analytics? You have some really great campaigns, and we talked about sound strategy, comedy, creativity. Where does data come in? Are you like against it, or what's your thoughts on using data? Do you have a negative reaction like I do?
I think informing the process early is great. Like, there's no downside to that, and there can be
Bring it all in.
there can be real insight and like real thought provoking
I don't know
shit
how to do that.
that
I don't know
happens
how to
early.
get. How do you? I don't even know how people do that. Gather a bunch of data. Is that like quantitative, qualitative, and then they come up with insights based off of that? I've interviewed data analytics, insights researchers, something like that. Those titles, they bring a bunch of stuff in, but isn't it all human centered? Like, can't you go do, like, a conversation at a bar and have, like, an insight come out? Or
Yeah,
you
I think
tell
so.
me.
No, I think so. So you and I are of the same mind to a certain degree. I think informing your brains when you're starting to figure something out is great. And there can be things that are like breakthrough notions that come from, this gap that you didn't know existed. Like, I think that's really possible. I find it goes back to the thing I was saying before. I find data about creative executions, even if they're fundamentally true, they're so limited in how you can apply that they're largely not valuable and they send us spinning. So, like, I don't know, I've never used this, but right, there's that thing where it's like, "Where's your eye go?" Or that thing where people lost interest at second 8. Like, I don't doubt that that is sort of quantitatively true, that more eyeballs went somewhere else during that moment. My point of view is, what's the response that's valuable? Being like, "Hey, then at second 8, you need to do something else." Like, when you make that thing and this it's synthetic, not human beast that you made, and then you go, "We need to use that," versus the thing that us as, like, intuitive human beings made, like, well, you've lost me completely. I also think, like, the this is such a creative guy, like, high-minded, airy-fairy point of view, but we're better about these things, computing, than anything we've invented so far. We are better. We are better at processing where people's brains are, how they feel in a moment, how society
Mhm.
what's the right tenor, what's the right inflection of a thing,
Yeah,
what's the style that's not intrusive or too much or too
right.
loud or
And that comes with experience and being in the industry as well. But soon, with AI and generative AI, who knows what the tech could bring?
well, right. And so it could come, but I'm cynical and not cynical that there won't be cool things. But like going back to my thing from before, like AI has surprised the freight train from that to becoming junk mail is fast, right?
Yeah.
Like the day where they figured out how to print handwriting that looked like someone's handwriting on junk mail, I'm sure they got a lot of people being like, whoa, or opening it surprising and thinking it was like a letter from their grandma. But how
Uh,
long did that last? And
Couple
then
days, yeah.
how quickly do we go, well, this is built to the process that isn't made with care for me
Mhm.
and isn't surprising. So like why would I engage? I don't know about you. I literally just tear those in half and throw them away as soon as I get to my house.
Yeah, and I see copy written by AI, and I can tell right away, and I know to skip it. Or even on TikToks, there's like these AI videos that you can definitely tell, and you just skip it. Like at first, you thought it was really interesting. We can't ignore it, and we need to leverage it and
There's
figure out
no
how to
doubt.
adapt. So I know we are all doing that and figuring that out. But I think that's a really really good take on that as well.
Thanks, dude.
All right, now final portion here. I want to know your final advice for students. We covered it a lot, but from your break-in journey, you could take this a couple ways. Talking to your young self or to the current listeners who are breaking in now, what do you want them to know about this industry, and what are some key takeaways for them?
I could just tell you a few things from my experience that I think hopefully will make people feel better.
I think so.
Didn't go to ad school. I started at I started as an account guy for 9 months. I also I didn't, you know, I've worked here in a couple places that you may have heard of, and that's it. Like I don't have like the Goodyear Widen pedigree to get me to this job. I have retained a core group of relationships within this industry, that some people might argue are regional. So I've done things that, like, I don't know if there are young people who are starting their career that maybe feel like steps that can't lead you to where you want to go. So I would just say, don't get too jammed up about that. Like, there are plenty of paths to get where you want to go. And if my intuition here for a long time was like, I don't think leaving here is the move for me. It could have been for other people. It just wasn't. And I got lots of recruiters saying, you're never going to get the job you want to get if you don't go to 2 other places that are big and work on different brands. I've been closely tied to the Progressive brand for 16 years. People told me that was death. You need to diversify what you're working on. It wasn't that that was bad advice necessarily. It just wasn't the right advice for me. Take a deep breath. Have faith in your path. There isn't one perfect way to do it, and that's okay. And I'm like walking proof of that.
How'd you make the
And
jump then from account to copy?
I was a basically like a literature scholar. Like I was going to be a PhD, and then I did that for like a year, and I quit. It just like wasn't a good fit for me. And I moved to Boston. And I was just trying to get jobs. I had a basement apartment paying $400 a month, and I was just like, I just want to get up and go to a job so I have enough money for spaghetti and beer.
And you got into the account track.
Yeah, and I just like literally answered a one ad and went in and like kind of talked my way. And I had, I went to a good college, and I'm a smart enough guy. Like,
Yeah.
and that, I was not a good account guy, and it was not like it was like at a direct response place. But I learned enough about how a project goes through an agency and what people's titles were and shit I didn't know because I didn't study advertising at college. It was helpful. And then it was like the first tech bubble, and I had a buddy who worked at a medical agency, and he called me, and I'm a writer in high school and stuff. So he called me and was like, "Do you still want to be a writer? We're hiring." I didn't have a book, but I went over and talked to them, and they took a chance on me, and I was like, I don't know if this is defeatist or not, but just being a professional writer, when they were like, "Hey, you have to write an 8-page brochure on like mammogram machines," I was like, "Cool, this is great."
That's something. Yeah.
Like I'm a professional writer. This is wonderful. So I didn't start at the right place. And then honestly, it's just like sort of steps from there. I went from there to like a place that was like a startup in Boston that was an offshoot. People who had worked at Arnold's and people who had worked at other big places and started this thing. And they found me, and then I worked there for a bit. And that was the first time I had friends who actually went to Arnold or went to Mullen.
Right. And that's where it started those connections started to build.
Yeah. Other answer to your question, like as far as like, it's hard to get your foot in the door. It is. Although there are lots of ways to do it. But I would say once your foot is in the door, at least here, and I can't speak for everywhere, but for not just me, but I would say everybody at Arnold, like those first 18 months, just work your ass off, have a good attitude, and say yes.
I love that.
Everything else happens if you do that. Everything
Yes.
else. We have several people here who are 3 or 4 years in who just showed up, and we were like, I wasn't like, oh my God, this kid's a genius. I didn't know yet, but they did say yes, do their absolute best, over deliver, and like I could count on them for at least heavy effort and oftentimes good results.
Effort will lead to good results down the line.
Yeah.
If you keep it up, I love that.
And
People
they
need to hear that. I love that advice.
those kids have careers now very quickly. Like
Yeah.
those kids are on big shoes.
And you'll make things happen, when
of
when they
course.
have that attitude, and you're going to give them other opportunities. Like, well, they work hard. I can trust them. I know they've been here. They show up physically. Maybe that
Yeah.
helps too. Damn it.
Yeah.
So I've been
Yes.
preaching that. Show
One
up.
of
if
the
you're
hardest
gonna
things to know when you're young is how much you're supposed to have a strong opinion or no opinion.
Mhm.
Like it's opinion business, right? Like, so as a
True.
writer to be like, I think it's better this way. That's important. But, early also you want to like, I don't know, follow the lead of your creatives and be part of a team. And so I think it's okay. You're going to have a future where your opinion matters big time. It's okay to say yes and listen. And even in the back of your brain going like, this CD doesn't know what he's talking about. This CD doesn't know what she's talking about. Like I could do better than that. That's okay. Have that in the back of your brain for 18 months. Just say yes to everything, work your ass off, and you'd be shocked at how quickly you're trusted. And
That's a tangible blueprint item, piece of advice that I live for. So, Sean, we'll leave it at that. How can people reach out to you if they have any other questions? They want to pick your brain, learn more about your work at Arnold.
email's great for me. McBride@arn.com. Always
Boom.
looking for, we're growing. Always looking for people who are fired up to dive in and make it happen.
Thanks. I appreciate you coming on, John. It was a beautiful interview, and we will be in touch.
Gino, thanks for having me, buddy. And thanks for putting up when I'm a huge pain in the ass about press releases and stuff.
Oh, they're great. They're great. I appreciate you.
You too, buddy.